Diversity.
You have caused confusion.
Fascist moron.
Well, hello everyone. This Friday, I've wanted to have a look at something that I regard as a British institution and as part of kind of life here. And I kind of love things that seem to be unique to this country that nobody else really cares about. And I reckon the snooker is one of those things. I'm joined by my good buddy, George Adams. Hello, George. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thanks, mate. Hope you're well.
There's George. There we are, talking in the background. And just before we get going here, we're going to have a look back at the different eras of snooker and talk a little bit about its history and some of our favorite players. We could even venture towards a top 5 or a top 10 players at the end that we've seen, you know. But before we get going, how long have you been watching snooker? What's your interest in it? How would you explain the appeal to anybody who's, you know, not interested at all?
Okay, well, my first ever autograph was a signed photo of Steve Davis that my mum got for me.
Did he sign at the Nugget? Did he sign at the Nugget?
I can't remember because unfortunately I can't find it. I don't know where it ended up. But apparently I used to sit there just staring at this photo of Steve Davis saying, "To George from your best friend Steve Davis." So maybe it was from that point. But now what used to happen is my mum and stepdad would go to work at weekends, so we would be left with my stepdad's grandparents, and they were great. And if it was on TV, because obviously back then before Sky and stuff like that, you were very limited. So Saturday afternoon grandstand, if the snooker was on, I sat there and watched it with them, and that was it. And that was quite easily the late 80s to midnight, early 90s, around that time.
Yeah, I think we may have the same kind of era. I mean, obviously we're similar ages, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think I remember the late 80s and really started watching, you know, the Hendry era really.
Yeah.
In the 90s, you know, I remember John Parrott winning. He was my favorite player, John Parrott, because he had a funny name. Just like Paul Parker had a funny name. He was my favorite football player. You know, he was called Parrot. I thought that was really funny when I was a kid. So
as I did. Me and my sister were watching it, and we're just like, "This man's called Parrot." You know.
But I mean, I remember the snooker always being on like because when does does it happen in May or around that sort of time? The World Championship
around April, yeah. Around April.
I always remember it being like having to revise for exams and things like that. It would always be around the time where there was work on at school,
right?
And obviously, snooker matches last quite a long time.
Yeah,
you know, it'd be on for hours, and it's one of those things you could just stick on in the background. You know.
Yeah.
So I kind of, you know, you could even try to do some work or pretend to do some work and kind of actually be watching the snooker for a long time. So
a few frames in.
So I mean, it's also one of those things. I mean, maybe less so now, but my dad was a you know, as well as being an engineer, was a retained fireman, and that means he had access to you know, the fireman social club, and they had an awesome snooker table in there, like a full size proper one. And I just loved getting all the balls out, and you know, do you remember the old scoreboards with the and it's one of those things that
the sliders that you would move along.
The little sliders, and I mean, the thing is, it's not as easy as it looks on TV. It's bloody hard. It's not like snooker is hard.
Yes, I remember the first time I went to a snooker club and saw a full size table, and I was in my late teens, so I was used to, should we say, having a glass of orange juice with my dad in the pub and playing on a pool table. And first time I went to see a full-size snooker table, I was like, oh my God. And the balls just go everywhere, and it's just almost intimidating to an extent, because you do go in thinking, oh, I'm going to be as good as those guys on TV, but far from it.
So, I mean, I don't know. There's something. I mean, I've been exploring this idea of vernacular British culture. You know, I've talked about I talked about Oasis. I talked about Carry On Films, the Beano, and I thought, well, the snooker is part of the culture in that sort of way as well. It's like
Absolutely.
It seems to belong to the same world. You know,
Yes.
I can imagine having a day, George, right, where I'd go to a car boot sale. Let's say it was a Saturday or a Sunday. You know, my mother would want to go pick up a bargain or whatever. I'd pick up a Beano Annual in the daytime. I could get back and be perusing my Beano Annual while, like, Jimmy White was playing snooker on the TV.
Yeah.
Like, that would have actually been a day I had in the early 90s.
Yeah, definitely. I was similar. If I was off school and it was on TV, it'd be a wet weekend or something, raining outside. I can always associate the rain outside the window of my house and snooker on the TV. So,
and then possibly you could flick over and maybe even a Carry On movie would be on ITV or something. Yeah. Genuinely. So
yeah.
So anyway, in the interest of time, let us
go.
It's the world of, like, pubs and the dartboard and smoky rooms and kind of.
It all stems from there, basically, doesn't it? I see what you're getting at. It's like, and the thing with snooker clubs, I always find is they can be associated with some nefarious individuals, shall we say. You can get some shady characters in these British snooker clubs back in the day, shall we say.
Yeah. I mean, they're still around. I mean, I know my brother did a tour of Welsh snooker clubs a while back. And funny enough, the only one he couldn't get into was the one in our hometown, because it was a members only club, and they're a bit funny like that. But he was able to get a game in all the other places. But anyway, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to, rather than just kind of ramble generally about snooker, we're going to have a look at the history of the game and the different eras. And obviously the first couple of these are before our time. I'll just say that they repeated 70s stuff, or they talked about 70s stuff a lot. So you know, like how in football, we never really got to watch Pele, but they banged on about him and George Best and stuff like that. So we kind of picked up the memories of those. But this era we're about to talk about here, the Joe Davis era, was like long gone. It was kind of a distant memory that, never mentioned. I don't think that they ever mentioned Joe Davis on TV, or if they did, I never noticed it.
I'd never heard of him until a few years ago, and even then, I didn't realise how many titles he'd won or anything. I just sort of.
What do you want?
I think it was some pub quiz, like how many Davises have won the fellas called Davis have won the world championship. It's snooker. Well, there's only one, isn't there?
Well, I watched some interviews with, like, various snooker players picking out their top tens and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was mentioned that Steve Davis did study Joe Davis, that he looked up to Joe Davis and studied footage of him and stuff like that.
Yeah. As
no relation, obviously.
No, but O'Sullivan's the same. He's got a book, Joe Davis, How to Play Snooker. How to play snooker. And apparently O'Sullivan credits reading that book around 2008, 2007 to some of his success back then.
What is interesting, because obviously he was still around. I mean, we're about to watch some footage of him talking to Brucey in a moment, and I've even found a footage of him playing with another later champion called John Pulman. But I heard in some of these, because I've watched quite a bit of in prep for this, I thought, I better stick on a few videos. Now my entire feed is just snooker content, by the way. YouTube's funny like that.
The algorithm,
but how can I put it? So a lot of the younger players were saying that Joe Davis, a little bit like the old timers in wrestling, were kind of like down on the current product type thing.
Yeah.
Joe Davis didn't like the way the game went for some reason. and I never quite understood like what that was about. But I'm guessing he was a more tactical player. But it was
Well, he did score. He's known for his break building. Apparently, he was the first to hit. Might not have been the first, but he was the first to hit a televised century, which is available. I watched that yesterday, and yeah, he was almost a pioneer in large break building. Apparently, the old game was pot a few reds, couple of colours, and then play safe.
right. Okay.
But apparently, that's how he got his name. So.
Well, I mean, he was certainly dominant. He was
Just slightly.
never beaten at the World Championships.
Yeah.
15 straight titles in a row. The only person who ever beat him professionally was his own brother, Fred, who then became the champion after 47. If you see Fred Davis, then becomes the champ.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of footage of him with Bruce Forsyth of all people. I think this is quite fun to have a little watch.
Yeah, I want to go into this draw. I see you post it, but I didn't watch it at the time. But I want to see this.
The World Snooker Championship in 1946, but in fact, how many times did you win the World Snooker Championship?
Actually, 20 years. I won it for 20 consecutive years.
Consecutive years? Yes. Good gracious. Well, who won it after you retired?
Brucey was even the same when he was young as he is now. Well, I say now, he's dead now, isn't he? But
yeah, blimey. That haircut.
Well, my brother won it several times.
Your brother?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So you kept it in the family?
Yes, we did, yes. Yes, known as the Davis Cup eventually.
I should think they would call it the Davis Cup. Now tell me, Joe, what has been your highest break?
I made 147.
Oh, yes, I heard about this. This was a record.
Yes, it is a record. It was the maximum possible. It can never be beaten. It can be equalled, of course, but can never be beaten because I took a black with every red of the 15 reds, 15 blacks, and all the other colours.
You've got it all sewed up, haven't you?
Well, it took a long time to sew it.
Well, now, Joe, we haven't got time at the moment for a lot of instruction, but I mean, there'll probably be a lot of youngsters looking in who are interested in the game. Can you give us a few basic pointers on how to play?
Yes. Would you like to take up the position?
Okay.
Well, the first principle here is to adopt the right stance, a good stance.
Oh, yes, show us the stance.
And the idea, first of all, put your left arm straight out to form the bridge.
Yeah.
That's right, on the table, like absolutely
cool.
straight out, like that. That's that. Now, the weight well forward. The weight well forward on the left leg.
On the left leg.
And the left knee bent.
Well, one of the things I read about with the slight kind of being down on the modern game that Joe Davis had is apparently in his day they play with ivory balls, which were a lot heavier. And then at some point they made the balls, well, the snooker balls now are light, right? The ones that we would have played with are much lighter.
Yeah.
And he was saying that much like when they changed the football and they made the balls lighter so they float or whatever, he was saying that, like, well, if I'd have been playing with those balls, I'd have been hitting 147 every game, pretty much, type thing. That was the kind of that was part of it. Is that they changed these balls were made out of actual ivory, like literal elephant tusk.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is apparently a lot heavier.
Yeah.
So. What do you think of Brucey's technique?
Oh, it just cracks me up. I'm like, I don't even. Is he playing here or is he serious? I don't think you can tell with him, can you? He's just so funny. Brilliant stuff. I'm waiting for him to say the line. Does he? The famous Brucey line. He must say it. Oh, we'll see what he says.
With the weight going forward.
That feels right.
That's right.
Well, nice to see you.
No, there's the other one, isn't there? Good game.
Good game. Let's. I mean, this is a 6 minute long. We're not going to watch it all. We'll go over the end to see if he says it at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Now your right leg is acting as a prop.
Yeah, straight.
Just behind it, absolutely straight.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Now then, your chin well down over the cue.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. That's the idea.
Oh, yeah.
Just as though you're shooting down the right.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that looks absolutely right.
Good.
Now, when you come to play the shot, another very important.
Most people's chins aren't that big.
I was going to say he had some chin on him as well. Blimey.
Factor is to keep the head and body perfectly still.
Perfectly still.
It's just like playing golf. You mustn't get your head up.
Right.
That's very bad. That's very good.
I'll try a shot. There you see, my chin's too big, Joe. You've an operation, I think.
In the way, you
Yeah,
chin?
the chin.
Ah, because I've got a little dimple there, you know.
Oh,
the
yeah.
cupid's in there. In there, you see, like that.
No, I'd have to get one of those fitted.
Oh, you must get one, yeah.
Yes. Well,
So shall we see if he says good game at the end?
Go for it.
Let's see if he says good game at the end. Let's have a look.
I don't know how you do it, but I'll pay.
Fine. Count them slow. 1,
2, 3,
Oh, you've won.
4, 5.
Thanks a lot.
Well, it's a pleasure, really.
Thank you. Lend us a quid, will you, Joe?
Gracious.
And now from Soho Square, we return you to the studio. 6 quid light.
Oh, he didn't say it, George.
No,
Oh well, maybe it
never
was a
mind.
Tree. So anyway, that was a bit of Joe Davis in action. We do have another clip of him because the only clip I could find of this next champion, John Pulman, who, I mean, if I hadn't heard of Joe Davis, I definitely hadn't heard of Pulman either.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I mean, he obviously pioneered those. I thought Dennis Taylor invented those glasses, but clearly Pullman's got the Dennis Taylor glasses. But he was champ in the 60s. And again, I mean, I don't think any footage exists of this era because they definitely didn't play it on TV, or they never really play these older dudes up for some reason.
Yeah. But you did find some, you say, sorry. You did find
I've got one clip of Joe Davis
Right.
and John Pulman having an exhibition match.
Oh, wow.
Fred Davis actually played into the 80s. I saw footage of Fred Davis playing some of the modern players.
Yeah.
I think he was the oldest person ever to appear at the Crucible, and he was still pretty good as well, apparently. So,
Nice.
anyway, here's Davis and Pullman.
And so to the quiet of the Leicester Square Hall, and the greater deliberation of the snooker table there, with Joe Davis, the greatest player the game has ever known. His opponent here is John Pulman, for many years amateur champion of Great Britain.
Love this footage.
It's cool, isn't it?
Joe Davis goes for that red ball just outside the triangle. A preliminary skirmish. He doesn't pot it. This is his opponent's chance.
There's us.
Yeah, pipes.
A red. 1.
Oh, wow.
So long as there are reds left, a red must always be taken before each of the more profitable colours. There he goes for the pink in the middle of the table. 7.
It's cool, isn't it? I love it.
Shot. Well, yeah.
Now for the red against the left-hand cushion.
This club was
Alas,
apparently
you
owned
can't
by
miss those against
Davis.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. But when you look him up, he's almost like the Vince McMahon of the snooker in that era. He, like I say,
Put it on
lobbied
the, he
to-
certainly put it on the
put it on
map
the
in
map.
some way,
yeah,
didn't he? Yeah.
and he lobbied to have a proper world championships and stuff. So yeah, it'd be interesting if he's got an autobiography out there or anything.
I think what I picked up is that so for example, there's a video of Jimmy White where he picks his top 10 players of all time, and he just says, "Oh well, I never watched Joe," so and he kind of like left him out type thing or put him last.
Right.
But there is a kind of sense among the players that the standard was a lot better. That during the Joe Davis era, he didn't have any competition basically. So he won 15 in a row because he was beating like blokes down the pub and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, basically. So, fair enough.
I think that the game basically was amateur during this time, and there weren't many professional players.
Yeah.
And then when we get into the Reardon Reardon Higgins kind of time, that is where you get a lot more of the kind of professional players. But we'll watch like a minute more of this, and then we'll get into the modern stuff. Yep.
Joe Davis, you may sit down now, Mr. Pulman, while the master clears the table. Here he is, down to the last few reds. A red.
Straight down, look.
Yeah.
The black. Watch how his certainty in potting the object ball enables him to concentrate on getting the cue ball back into position.
I can tell he was good, look.
He mastered the angles.
From this tricky situation, Joe Davis pulls this out of the bag. And it's in.
Come on.
I'm starting to question
What's that real?
the authenticity of this footage. The shot was probably Will, but I can't imagine he was actually in that situation during the match.
There's no way that happened. This is billed as an exhibition, by the way, but come on.
Yeah.
And the off-center impact which made the ball curve, well, a cue can hit off-center too.
Yeah, I think Pulman was doing the job on this occasion, by the way.
That's what
when I watched this, I mean, basically he clears up Davis. I mean, if we fast forward, he just Pulman doesn't see the table again. But that was the only footage of Pulman I could find. So yeah. All right. So now we're into what I'm calling the Reardon era, and this is a little bit unusual because you were talking about Davis as the Vince McMahon, George.
Yeah.
Basically, Alex Higgins is the Hulk Hogan of snooker, right? He is the guy who is credited with taking snooker out of the smoky halls and making it a big TV thing, bringing millions to the screens.
Yes.
So this is a strange thing because in the record books, obviously it's Reardon. You know, he was like 6-time champ. But in the cultural memory, this is the Higgins era, right?
Yeah. He was the draw basically because of his charisma, his antics, his shots, his style. Everything.
He was a showman, wasn't he? He was a
showman. Yeah, exactly.
And well, I mean, I've got some footage of Higgins in action here as well. But I mean, I remember watching a documentary once. It was a pretty good documentary, like Higgins versus Reardon. Like it was a full hour length feature on Higgins, but Reardon was like the kind of the heel in it or the villain or whatever. And basically the contrast between the two of them is that Higgins was a showman and an attacking player, basically, wasn't he? Reardon was wily, a kind of like he wasn't just good at safety; he was good at snookering his opponent.
Yes,
and when I was watching the snooker players picking out their top tens, there was always this question of, well, what about Reardon, right? Because he dominated in the 70s. The style is different now, right? I guess all the players are more attacking now, right? And some of the players were saying, well, like the thing is, if Reardon was around now, he wouldn't let you get all those massive breaks against him. He would basically like play in such a way that he would make it impossible to get like 10 centuries against him or even 1 century against him, because that's how sly he was. That's how cunning he was as a player.
He'd almost park the bus in snooker terms, wouldn't he? Or
defensive,
and the thing is someone like Higgins, they would only play one way as well. So it's the same with Jimmy White later on. They literally just went on the attack, played fast, and it could cost them. As my granddad said when we were sitting there watching it on one of those Saturdays in his Sunderland accent, if he didn't know how just to pot balls, he would have been world champion years ago. That was a terrible Sunderland accent, sorry, but yes, and which was the case for Jimmy White. But we'll get on to that. But Yeah, there was always a fascination in the contrasting styles when they came up against each other.
And I think because Reardon had so much success, it's almost like in football. Remember when football went through like a defensive era, like
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of some of the the Italian defensive teams,
Yeah.
Trapattoni and all of that in the 80s.
yeah,
It's almost like snooker went through an entire era where the game was defensive. I'm almost reminded of Pete Sampras era tennis as well, where it was just like
yeah, just literally serve volley and that's it. Yeah, along those lines. Very boring.
And a lot of the players around this time. I mean, Terry Griffiths was another one. Very sneaky, kind of safety first type player, wasn't he? Terry Griffiths.
They're all Welsh. They're all Welsh, funny enough.
Yeah, and well, one of the things I found, George, was this amazing HTV Cymru Wales, right, documentary featuring Welsh snooker players. Now we have to watch a bit of this footage because when you see some of the pubs and stuff in this, it's awesome. Let me just get this up.
Somewhere on the surface of the globe, we all have a favourite patch that we call home. And I'd like to tell you about a funny thing that's kept on happening up here where I was born. We hope that it'll happen again. It's a global story in a way, and I'd like to show you where it all started. Narrow down the world then to Britain, then Wales, then South Wales. 30 miles.
No, that's where I grew up, George. right in this, right between Swansea and Cardiff is where I grew up on the coast there. So
Miles up from the Bristol Channel to the remote end of two mining valleys where there's not much mining anymore, to a couple of small towns and a tiny village barely 2 miles apart.
So we're not going to watch all this documentary, but I just look at some of these interiors. I remember going to houses where it was like this, all the knickknacks and all the wooden spoon on the wall and the horseshoe and all the rest of it. Many houses in the valleys look like this. Without the snooker table there, obviously.
Sorry, you did just cut out a little bit there for me.
Here we are. Look, here's a bit of Terry Griffiths.
That's Griffiths, isn't it?
Griffiths, yeah.
So this is where all the homework's done.
Yeah.
Yes, this is where I get all the hard work done, ready for the big tournaments.
Do you always use the same cue?
Oh, yes, I've had this for 7 or 8 years, this cue. Oh, same one always, yeah.
I hope it serves you well tonight with Doug Mountjoy.
Oh, yes, it'll be okay.
So anyway, in this documentary, you get to see them hanging out. I loved watching this, but you can see some of how things used to be. Look,
that lovely old sound, lovely car rolls,
and then they do this bizarre thing. So there's some of the other players that set 70 shirts in 1982.
Love it.
But look, there they are.
Doug Mountjoy. There you go. Pint and a fag.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Look at all these characters.
That guy looked like one of the Briscoes.
Yeah, he did.
You called that, didn't you? Yeah.
And then there they are, a cup of tea. And they do this weird. They look some adverts selling some pints. Look, and
look at that.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
But at one point they end up having. There's Reardon.
Yeah. They called him Dracula, didn't they?
He looked a lot like Dracula, didn't he?
Yeah.
At one point they do this bizarre thing where they have a game of snooker out in a field, like outside. Yeah, there. Look.
Oh, there it is. Look at that.
I don't know what they would do. I don't know why they did this, but they decided to have a game of snooker in a field surrounded by horses.
And all their best clobber as well.
Quite surreal, really.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to show you some of that footage because I thought it was awesome.
It's good. Good stuff.
But I do have a clip of Higgins his best break ever. I think this was in '82. But
Right.
the other thing that Higgins did that a lot of the players said, when he won his second title, he brought his kid out.
That's
Much
right.
like much like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in that way.
Yeah. I remember this. Yeah.
He brought his kid out. Now,
Yeah, and he was in
these
tears.
days, everybody does that in every sport, right? But apparently, Higgins was the first one to like bring his family in.
Yeah.
Proper baby face, you know. So
Yeah. Well, it was a proper baby face, and the crowd were just in pieces because it'd gone off the boil, and it was 10 years after his first title, and I think he might have even retired in that time as well, and then come back. So
here's his most famous break. We'll have a watch of Higgins, and then we'll have a quick advert break, and we'll talk about the stuff we remember then.
Cool. Gosh.
I should mention, by the way, that Snooker YouTube is surprisingly big. It was way bigger than I was expecting it to be.
Loads of videos available.
Quite a scene.
Yeah.
Beano YouTube, not so much, but Snooker YouTube is pretty big.
When snooker referees get angry.
Yeah, and a lie, just George lies in the thumbnails.
Yeah,
like in there's one which has got like a real clickbait thumbnail of this female referee arguing, and it doesn't happen. And all the comments like the thumbnail didn't happen in the clip.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it. But anyway, let's watch Higgins' famous break here. Now, was this break against Reardon? I can't remember.
Is this the final?
I think it may be. I think it may be the final.
And it's
lost it to Ray Reardon in 1976. And
I'm pretty sure this is 82. I think this is when he won it.
82.
Lost it to the
Reardon.
Canadian champ.
Yeah, there you go. Look.
Yeah.
So he overcame his nemesis in the end.
Yeah.
Reardon never won it after that either. So
I mean, you couldn't write that story in bloody pro wrestling, could you? Finally got over.
He won the blow off after many years of chasing the title.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was some of Higgins, and we don't have to watch it all, but that was some of Higgins in action. All right, so let's have a quick break to play an advert here. Which one do you want? Let's go for the old classic Trivium. I've got to keep the lights on here. Buy a course at the academic agency. Pick up the Trivium today, and when we come back, we're going to be talking more. That's the end of the footage, George, because I reckon we could talk about the rest of it from memory, basically. But when we come back, we'll talk about the Davis era, the Hendry era, O'Sullivan era, and we'll also have a chat about who we think is the best of all time.
Order now from the academic agency.
All right, so we're getting into the era now where I mean, obviously I was too young in 82, 83, 84, 85, but I feel like the Snooker TV did a very good job of constantly recapping all these moments. You know, the finger point by Taylor in 85,
Yeah,
Um,
they would.
Davis was a pundit for years, and they always kind of went back over his highlights, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, and they would also in the World Championships, they would always put good video packages together, and they would include classic clips of winners past, and then sort of mesh it with whoever was doing well in that tournament, and they'd always play it at the final. It would be set to something like Queen or Sting, like one of their songs.
And we haven't mentioned, George, the snooker theme is bloody brilliant, isn't it?
Oh, it's a classic. Yeah.
I don't know about if copyright will allow us to play it, but I'll tell you what, in post production I'll stick it under us talking for a while.
Excellent.
I'll stick it in somewhere. It's an excellent theme. It really is.
It's a classic.
One of the all time. I mean, they had such good themes at BBC back then. Grandstand was epic, and
yeah. Ski Sunday was even pretty good.
Yeah, brilliant themes. But yeah, the snooker, one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Now, Davis, more of a safety first player. He was good at shot selection. He was careful.
Yeah.
That was basically his. I mean, he was called the Nugget. That was his ability to stay in games basically and grind his opponents down.
Yep, definitely. He was good technically. He could, from what I remember, I seem to think he had a good. You know those shots when they've been playing safe off the break for a while, and the ball always ends up around the D. He could always seem to pick a good long range pot, but then also bring the cue ball safe if he had missed it. He was always pretty good at that, it seems. So yeah, he was just really solid, and I mean, you can see his list of opponents there. Jimmy White, he took out Griffiths, Parrott. So
gave Parrott an absolute drubbing in '89.
Yeah. I mean, were they the strongest? Not sure. Parrott was quite young then, wasn't he? But
that was the knock on him by a lot of when Davis was coming up. They would always say, well, he was good for his era.
Yeah,
but the roster wasn't that good in the '80s. That's what they'd claim.
No,
which,
he was.
It's a bit harsh on Cliff Thorburn and John Virgo, the characters who were around back then, you know.
Yeah, and the guy in my profile pic, which we'll get onto.
Yeah, who is this?
So this is Bill Kermanick, and Bill's claim to fame was he was another because there was a group of Canadians around this time playing who would feature Thorburn. What was his name? Kirk James, I think. So Bill would let's see. Bill was known for how much alcohol he would drink before, during, and after the matches, to the point where, if true, he would drink close to 50 pints of lager a day.
Come on, 50 pints.
Well, this was due to apparently he was told by doctors to drink alcohol to counteract a tumor, essential tremor or something, and so he went to the extreme, I guess. But you would always see him with at least 2 or 3 jugs of beer where he was sitting, and also smoking as well. And that for me, he was just it was huge. And I believe he collapsed during a game or passed out or something. So, yeah, Bill Webernick, a classic, a legend in the old school days when they were sitting there drinking pints, and Alex Higgins was drinking straight vodka and smoking 20 cigarettes a frame or whatever. You
know. Why was there a stable of Canadian jobbers in the 80s? There was always a few Canadians knocking around.
Yeah, Cliff Thorburn. Who was the other one? I think his name was Alex Kirk Webernick, and there's one more. I can't remember the guy's name. But yeah, and then they were soon swapped out for some Chinese or some Thais in the 90s.
Well, there was James Wattenaar, wasn't there?
That's it. Yep.
I remember. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like some of the other players. Let me just click on the '88 tournament there to see who else was in that. Obviously Jimmy White was around. I mean, White never won it, did he?
No, I think he got to 6 finals, and that was just he was the next one on from Higgins. I mean, if anything, he took it a level above Higgins in terms of his play and how much the crowd loved him. And for him just to miss out, when you'll see when you go to the Hendry era, the match that they had late into the night, to miss out on one frame, one shot, just it almost broke him, like away from the game as well. But he did come back, not to any great heights of winning stuff, but he came back and played, and he still turns up today. Apparently, exhibitions, little tournaments and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's on YouTube a lot, and I don't know. Let's just say he sounds like he's had years of substance abuse. That's all I'll say about him.
Yes, yeah,
You know, that's what he sounds like anyway. But I'm just having a look at the roster here, and really, it wasn't that Tony Drago doing him.
Yeah, he was he was quicker than Jimmy White. He just literally was so fast. Yeah,
he was from Malta.
That's it. More, yeah, big guy, quite a big guy, Tony Drago.
John Virgo, the big break co-host. He was He was in round one, knocked out by Davis. Dennis Taylor, Cliff Wilson, Neil Folds.
Yeah.
I saw him on YouTube.
Tony Mayo, sorry.
Tony Knowles. I'm trying to have a look. Tony Mayo.
Yeah. That was I had his brand of snooker table.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. He's never won anything. He just sold snooker tables, I guess.
I mean, it wasn't I guess the point. Kirk Stevens, he was another Canadian.
That's the guy. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Kirk Stevens. Yeah.
Yeah, not the strongest in the 80s, I would say. The roster. Anyway, so that was the Davis era. Then we get to the Hendry era.
Yeah.
And go on, George.
Yeah, the standard does go up here in terms of the players, even though it might not look it when you look at Hendry dominating, but Hendry did come on the scene and just blow everyone away. And also, they all pretty much stopped drinking at the table. So
yeah, they got a lot more professional, I guess you'd say.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did.
I mean, the thing is, during this era, and one of the aspects of the game that we haven't talked about is the mental. It's the mental element of snooker. Yes. Parrot won in '91, by the way. It's just been lopped off there from the screenshot, but that was John
against
Parrot.
White.
That was against White
as well. Yeah, I think it was 6 in a row or 5 in a row. White got 2 and just didn't win one.
And I mean, Ken Doherty got it in '97, which I always remember being kind of a strange win. He was more of a kind of safety player. He was kind of boring. Ken Doherty.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. I sort of switched off to him.
He was one of the more boring players. Ebdon had his jackets. I recall.
He was very animated. Peter Ebdon. He would try and get the crowd going almost at the end of each frame that he won. And he had his
a bit of a fist pump.
Yeah, and he had his long ponytail, and now he's got less hair than the cue ball, so it's crazy.
But I mean, one of the things that they were talking about is that Hendry during this era, mentally the players would be beat before they'd even start playing.
Yes, yeah,
right. That he was that good that they'd already kind of like they didn't want to play him basically, so they were kind of didn't have any like before anything had even happened they'd already lost. And I don't know what happened with after '99, but how is it that Hendry went from being this good to falling off a cliff basically? did he just get bored, or
I think he got bored. He had that personality about him. He was quite a well, I wouldn't say temperamental, because I mean, we're going to get onto O'Sullivan, but he was machine-like in his playing, and he just he had it as well. He was young, and I think he wanted to sort of maybe live a life, almost go and have a life. He had been playing snooker for so long from such a young age, and he did come up against some new talent, but yeah, I think he just sort of went off the boil. But he's still an active. He's actually still registered to play. So
is he? He made a couple of comebacks, and I know he's got he is big in the world of snooker YouTube. By the way, he's got a big channel.
Yeah.
He's and he has guests on and things.
Yeah,
but
they're good videos. I've seen a few.
I mean, I saw one where he was saying that he could still win now if he was even at 2% of his former glory, but he just can't be bothered, or
Yeah, he's earned his money.
A lot of them talk about how grueling the practice schedule is, don't they?
Yes.
They've got to practice like 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah. To be the best, that's what they had to do. It's like going over to darts quickly. Phil Taylor in darts literally was the only one who was practicing at his time, at his peak, 8-9 hours a day. So the training is for the mental side of it, if anything, like 60-40, because it's a grind. When you think you're playing, it might not look physically exerting, but your focus and the slightest fraction out, and you missing those shots, it makes all the difference. I mean, the sixer. Go on. Sorry.
It does seem to be a mental thing, though, because, like, I mean, if you have a look at Hendry's age, he was still pretty young in the 2000s, but he just couldn't. He was done. He just didn't.
Yeah.
Mentally, he'd lost it for some reason.
Yeah, they just I can imagine. I mean, they do travel the world as well, don't they? They go off to snooker's huge in Asia, parts of Asia. Some of them also went over to playing the Americans at pool. They wanted to try their arm at that. I think it was called the what was it? The Moscone Cup, where Britain play, or Europe play, the USA in 8-ball pool. And yeah, sometimes they tried around at that, but yeah, like I say, just taking a break, I guess. Just taking a break. And like I say, after, when you look at it's interesting when you look at 1994 Hendry versus Jimmy White. That one will always stay with me, because that went late on into the evening on Sunday, before I school the next day, and went down to the last frame, and Jimmy White was building a comfortable break, and he just missed a routine black, and that was it. It was game over. Hendry came to the table, machine-like, and just cleared it, and it was a really somber tone amongst the fans, and look at that, Jimmy White doesn't appear in any of these finals in the World Championships again.
Did it broke his mind, do you think?
I think it did. Again, we've mentioned his vices, which he has admitted to. So yeah, which is a shame, because he was so beloved. I mean, I heard a story of him. They would all visit local snooker clubs unannounced, and he would play like kids and let him beat him or something, like, like young kids coming up, or offer tips, or if there were any young women in there, they would go, "Oh, I beat Jimmy White last night," and all that sort of crap. So yeah, they would and Jimmy White carried on doing that, but to a bit of excess, really, unfortunately.
Do you know what's crazy looking at that 94 tournament? I'm just looking at the brackets there. In the opening match, or the opening round, taking on Dennis Taylor and beating Dennis Taylor, was a very young Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Wow.
He then gets smashed by John Parrott in the second round, 13-3. Parrott was obviously number 2 in the world at that time.
Yep.
But it just goes to show you how long Ronnie O'Sullivan's been playing, because he was in the 93 tournament as well.
Yeah, I think, was he just a kid, 16 years old?
He must have been very young. But I guess this kind of shows you that Hendry was almost a victim of his own success, because he was the player that all those the likes of O'Sullivan and so on grew up watching or grew up
Yes.
kind of trying to emulate. He was the man type thing.
And then they were gunning for him.
And they were. I mean, I'm just seeing some of the other youngsters on the roster, right? John Higgins was around in the.
Yeah.
He's not doing that well. I mean, I'm thinking like this is pretty young for John Higgins. This is quite a long time ago. These guys are still playing.
He was playing. He was the one playing yesterday when I was watching with my granddad.
Yeah, and I'm just seeing now, like the 96 tournament there, which was won by Hendry Ebdon in the final. John Higgins reached the quarters. In fact, he was beaten by Ronnie O'Sullivan, and O'Sullivan made the semis, and he was beaten by Ebdon 16-14. So O'Sullivan was reaching the semis even in 96.
Yeah.
With Higgins also kind of, I mean, they were mid-carders at this time in wrestling terms, right? But
yeah, they were like the Edge and Christian, weren't they? And that little era,
or
hardest.
Exactly, or the Evolution or something. Like I don't know, but they were there and they were being touted even at this time.
Yes, yeah.
And there comes a moment, and I really think it's probably that 2000, because I'd stick Mark Williams with those two as well, with Higgins and O'Sullivan. Williams is also tends to be talked up as a really good talent, as a great player.
He was. Well, he is.
And I would say that one where Hendry finally didn't win, because it was Williams the year before.
Yep.
And he finally won in 2000, and that I would say starts what I would call the O'Sullivan.
Oh, Ronnie.
The O'Sullivan era.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because even though I'm calling it the O'Sullivan era, he hasn't dominated it in the same way, because Higgins is a good player. Williams is a great player. Selby is a good player, more recent. That Judd Trump is talked up as well by some people.
Yes, he was. And you had Sean Murphy.
Murphy wasn't bad, was he?
It wasn't bad at the time.
So what a lot of the people say is that, like, O'Sullivan has a much higher standard of competition.
Yeah.
And I would say that could you put that down to Hendry, all of these guys looking up to Hendry in the 90s, taking what he did and perfecting it in a way.
Definitely,
I was watching a number of O'Sullivan interviews, and he's talked a lot about Ray Reardon being his coach or coming on and helping him. Because O'Sullivan is a natural raw talent, like 20 out of 20 raw talent. But his if allowed his own game, he'd be like Higgins or Jimmy White, right? Like he'd want.
He needed to rein it in. He's considered the most naturally gifted player to play snooker ever. And a lot of these wins by other players could have purely been down to O'Sullivan just not fancying it that day. He's walked off mid games. There's a clip of him missing a black, I think. He's playing Hendry, and he just walks up to him. He says, "Call it quits." Shakes his hand, shakes the refs like mid game, and just walks off.
Couldn't be bothered.
Just couldn't didn't fancy it. I'm going. And there's numerous occasions where he's done that, and he's walked away from the game, and he's come back, and he's walked away. But because just of his pure talent and his character, if you've got a progression of people's champions, even though he's won plenty, he gave the fans what they wanted from Jimmy White, a title and the charisma and the play. And they're just drawn to him. Everybody's drawn to him.
Good showman.
Yeah.
Bit more how can I say it, unpredictable than because there's always that time where the commentators say things like, "Oh well, we don't want to see that," and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's got that kind of he's got that kind of stone. He's more of a stone cold type than a pure baby face,
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And also it's funny because he was also making it big around the time the Gallagher brothers were, and you could have almost taken him when he was
That's
young. Look at pictures of
interesting,
it when he's 18. When he's about 18, you could take a picture of him and put him in amongst Oasis, and you'd think he was the third brother in the band.
Interesting. I hadn't made that connection, but it's true. He had attitude. He's got
definitely.
attitude.
Yeah.
Sullivan's
Look
got
at,
attitude. Yeah.
you can go back and see his interviews after matches and that. Oh, I don't care. I mean, he famously, you might remember this, beat a Canadian guy by playing left-handed in the final frame or something, and the Canadian guy spat his dummy out and walked off. And then O'Sullivan in the interview said, "Well, I'd just like to change you up a bit, like, you know, it's a bit boring sometimes, don't it?" Just stuff like that. And this Canadian guy's, "Oh, we don't need that in the sport and stuff like that." And like, well, no, maybe you do, because
didn't you tell me the other day that he said that the only reason he's still playing is because he thinks everyone else is shit? Did he really say
yes, basically, he said, "Yeah, I'm still playing because none of these guys are any good," or something along those lines.
Oh my God.
He just tells, well, I hate to say it, but he tells it straight. He tells it like it is.
Well, one of the things I couldn't help but notice that all of, like, obviously snooker is kind of a closed world, so all the guys know each other, but they don't have shit talk each other. Like there's a lot of beef between different guys at different times. Like Mark Williams calling Hendry a tit and stuff like that. It's kind of it's funny, and they fall out at different times, and then they're mates at other times. It's kind of funny like that.
And even if they're not allowed to drink on TV, they are drinking a lot behind the scenes sometimes. Like, they're letting their hair down. The older guys are. Apparently, Mark Williams is an absolute animal around a pint. So,
right, okay, yeah.
And same as O'Sullivan didn't mind a light out here and there. So, they're just as big, if not bigger, personalities away from the Green Bays, shall we say?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. There is a kind of. I mean, I know it's a very different type of thing, but there is that kind of weird crossover with pro wrestling, or the personality. It's all about the personality, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just before we finish this off, George, if we had to pick a top 10, or
top 10,
the GOAT, right?
The GOAT.
Does everybody agree that the GOAT is O'Sullivan? And that's not even close.
I think so. Even the commentators on TV constantly talk about him being the best ever. So, yeah, so he's number one.
So O'Sullivan's the best. So I guess it's a more interesting question then. Who's number two? We've got, I mean, basically Davis, Hendry, Reardon, I guess you put in the conversation. But then the question is always, the standard in the O'Sullivan era that we're calling was higher.
Yes.
Undoubtedly, it was higher, right? I mean, Hendry was beating like James Watnar and people like that.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, would Watnar get a look in now? I mean, would he qualify?
Probably not. No, probably not. But I think peak Hendry could compete with those guys. So I'm game to put him as second.
Do you think there's an argument to say that Hendry was too attacking? He was just all out attack all the time. That he just.
I think it was.
Go on, George.
I think it's what got him past Wyatt on, because I think he played him something like 4 times on the spin in the final, was his technical side, his safety game, which is what you needed to do against Wyatt, because you'd put him in as many pickles as you could, so to speak, because the thing about White was he could get out of some outrageous snookers. Again, if anyone's interested, look up Jimmy White and Alex Higgins' best shots. A lot of them are out of snookers, or just so. I mean, he was very aggressive. I think he was an aggressive player. Like I say, he was just machine-like, wasn't he? He's like.
Well, what I think happened is that, or what I seem to remember happening, is that peak Hendry, you're right, George, had a great all-round game. I mean, obviously you can't win, what was it, 7 titles on the bounce, six on the bounce, and then a 7th in 99.
Something like that, yeah.
You know, you can't do that unless you're going to a great all-round game. But what I seem to remember happening, especially later on, you know, late 90s and going into the early 2000s, is that he just seemed to like, I don't know if he was bored or whatever, but he never like. I remember games where it'd almost be like Hendry. You know, he could have 10 centuries in one game, and he'd still lose.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like kind of
Yeah.
like meant like he was still amazing in the early
Yeah.
2000s, but it's almost like he'd lost interest in the safety element of the game.
Possibly, maybe he was trying to make it more enjoyable for himself if he just went like more
all out attack.
all out, and also, like I say, he was the villain for a lot of people because he denied Jimmy White, the people's champ, his one title, you know, and I think he's actually gone a long way to try and redeem himself because he's a lot more laid back and funny in his videos that you see on YouTube, and his commentary is very relaxed.
Yeah, he wasn't always popular with the other players, Hendry. He was seen as being a bit kind of, you know, apparently he was very driven, not by money, but just by beating the other person. Like he was in it just to kind of, you know, I drink your milkshake type thing. So when he was younger, anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So you're picking Hendry 2. You've got O'Sullivan 1, Hendry 2. I go along with that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
3.
Ooh. I mean, if it was me personally, because I favour the attacking game, I'd say Jimmy White. But he hasn't got the titles to back it up. It depends if we just what we're going on. Or do you just say, look, at the end of the day, Joe Davis did win all those matches. Do you stick him in at 3rd? You know,
this is one of those difficult things. It's like picking Pele as the greatest all time. We never watched him play.
Exactly. Yeah, never watched him play once. I did manage to watch Johan Cruyff once.
Did you do a Cruyff turn?
He did actually. Yeah, it was in Dennis Bergkamp's testimonial match. So he came on for like 10 minutes, and everyone just slowed down to a walking pace of commentating. Yeah, see, I actually do try to avoid stuff like that. You know, I mean, yeah, he was the best player. You know, when did he last play? When did he last win? His last title was 1946. Was like, blimey, my snooker watching granddad might have seen him.
That's the thing. I mean, 1946 was a long time ago.
Yeah.
You have to have a separate legends thing.
Yes, quite possibly.
Joe Davis thing, you know,
a legacy wing. But 3rd, then, I mean, this guy Selby's a good player. I mean, he's won against John Higgins. Probably, I'd possibly stick Higgins in it.
Higgins is good, you see.
John Higgins, yeah. I'll stick him in it. Right, if I take Jimmy White off my sleeve, 3rd, I'll say Higgins.
Okay, interesting pick. Okay. So they reckon Mark Williams is really good as well.
Yeah.
And that Williams had been around. Let's pretend Williams was around in the 80s, right? They reckon he would have won like all the titles at that time.
Yeah.
You know, or even if he was around, if O'Sullivan hadn't been there, Williams would have had a lot more of these. They reckon. You know, same is true of Higgins, and the same is true of well, I mean, Selby has won a couple, hasn't he? Four.
Yeah.
Now, so.
Yeah. And it's interesting looking at Mark Williams. Look at when he won these titles, the year he got 2000, 2003, and then 15 years later he wins it again.
Pretty
2018.
amazing. Really.
It's crazy.
And Higgins three finals in a row there for Higgins against different opponents. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're not fancying the Nugget, even though he was your best mate.
Yeah, I've got to put him in somewhere, haven't I? I might. I was thinking Reardon 4th, Davis 5th,
something like that. Okay, all right, I'll go along with that.
And then I've got to put Jimmy in there because my late mother had given me a slap round the head because he was her favourite player. So I'll go Jimmy White as 6th.
God, but the other Higgins, Alex Higgins.
Alex, I'd have,
box office, Alex Higgins.
Box office, and he's got 2 titles to his name, which Jimmy White hasn't. So maybe I'll have to swap them around.
All right, well, okay.
That's a top 7 there, isn't it? And then
We've got a 7. See, my favourite was John Parrott, but really, he's been a commentator. He'd be in the top 5 commentators, maybe. Clive Everton, John Parrott,
and Lowe as well, wasn't it? Ted Lowe.
Ted Lowe, yeah.
Really deep voice, yeah.
Whispering.
Sorry, yeah.
I love it. The whispering commentators.
Yes, brilliant.
I kind of like Henry. I mean, if you ever see Hendry's a demon on commentary. He's
Yeah,
so
he's
critical.
good. I like it.
He's
Yeah,
so
I like him.
He's critical, though, isn't he? Like,
yeah. I think he's good. Yeah, I mean, maybe leave it as top 7. That'd fit nicely considering 7's the most you can score on 1 ball. Black.
All right, we'll leave it with a 7. Trying to think of who else would go there. I mean, did you put Mark Williams on the list?
No, so you could throw Williams in there.
It'd be these guys in some order, basically, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it'd be these characters.
Definitely.
It just depends on which way around you put them. So
yeah,
we'll go in O'Sullivan, Hendry. Who'd you say?
Third.
Higgins, John Higgins, third.
John Higgins for me, yeah.
Reardon Davis. Then you put
Alex Higgins,
Jimmy White, and then some version of Mark Williams, Mark Selby, and
Joe Davis.
And Joe Davis.
Sling him in there, number 10.
Joe Davis, 15-time world champ.
Yeah, I'm starting to look at those numbers and I'm wondering, someone...
All right. Well, I hope people enjoyed this. Those of you who there'll probably be some like absolute snooker anorak who've been like, these two guys know nothing.
Yes. Yeah. I'll look forward to the comments because
they'll be if you're
getting the carry on fans, aren't you? Slipping to the comments.
Yeah. Well, there was a massive Beano guy dropped in the last one. So. But we'll probably be slaughtered by the snooker aficionados. But to be honest, this is a more casual kind of just I don't usually talk about snooker on this channel, right? So it was a chance for us to just remember that snooker exists and talk about it for a bit.
Those great days of the Embassy World Snooker Championship on BBC One, Saturday afternoons.
All right. Cheers, George.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great.